What you're seeing in this video is a clip from my live stream that I do on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the OBR's YouTube channel. It's a show I call Quincy Carrier Live. So if you want to catch me live on Mondays during the football season, make sure you subscribe to the OBR's YouTube channel. Me and them are doing a collaboration for this year, and I'm going to be live Mondays at 7 p.m. on the OBR. Because with all the reports about how Kevin Stefanski is off the hook, pretty much, like the pressure is off of Kevin, especially after that win at Pittsburgh, it to me feels like now the spotlight goes from being exclusively focused on Kevin Stefanski, and then it turns to Andrew Berry. Because now that we have relative confidence that Kevin's not going to lose his job, that they're not going to hold this win-loss record against him because of the whole Watson thing. Now it's not about Kevin Stefanski and what his record is. Now it's about how Andrew Berry delivers on what's going to be the toughest job of his life and likely the toughest job for a lot of GMs in the NFL, which is how well can you maneuver around the Watson contract being a complete bust? This is the worst case scenario when he signed the contract. We're living in the worst case scenario. It does not get worse than this. Literally, this is the worst case scenario for Deshaun Watson's contract. Now, I know some people are going to want Andrew Berry to be held accountable for the Watson trade. I don't think the Watson trade is something that you need to hold somebody accountable for, because like 12 teams wanted him. It was a sweepstakes for Deshaun Watson, and we're using what we know now in 2024 to be judgmental about making that trade in 2022. But if we're being honest about it, in 2022, what they gave up to get Deshaun Watson made sense given who people thought Deshaun Watson was at the time. Nobody knew, even Houston knew, that Deshaun Watson would tank the rest of his career in the way that he's tanked it, right? That was a unexpected. That I can have some grace for. And the one part of the Deshaun Watson trade that I think does deserve some blame, I don't think has anything to do with Andrew Berry, to be honest with you. And that's the contract that Deshaun Watson got. Like the fully guaranteed contract, I mean, we know who that was. Like, we know what that smells like. The idea to trade for Deshaun Watson in 2022, I can see Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, and Jimmy Hasselbeck going, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. The contract for Deshaun Watson, well, only one man in the organization has the power to greenlight something like that. And it ain't Andrew Berry, and it certainly ain't Kevin Stefanski, right? Like, that part's obvious. So the blameworthy part of this whole move is the contract that Watson got. If you had just traded for Deshaun Watson and not given him a new contract, you'd be able to wipe your hands of him clean after this year based on what his old contract was extended to. But that's not the world that we live in. We live in the world where Deshaun Watson got the most guaranteed money of any quarterback up until, I believe, Joe Burrow got $240. And since I don't blame him for the contract, I'm not going to throw and put the trade in Deshaun Watson himself all on Andrew Berry. It seems very unfair. So what does this mean, right, when it comes to how he has to maneuver out the Watson contract? There's many different ways around this. One, you have to draft really well, right? Like, he has first-round picks for the first time in a few years. He has second-round picks for the first time in a couple. He has a lot of draft picks for the first time in a while. Not just regular draft picks, top 100 draft picks. The Browns weren't in asset accumulation mode, but they have picks now. They have picks in the back end to move up and get more picks. They have a lot of resources to make the team better over the next couple of years that have opened up since the compensation part of the Deshaun Watson trade has taken place. How does he maneuver that? How well does he draft? he's going to be judged for these drafts a lot harsher than he was for the other drafts that happened while you didn't have first round picks, right? And I think he's gotten away with being an average to above average general manager when it comes to drafting because he hasn't had first round picks and he hasn't had second round picks, right? Like that's just been what the situation was. And given the situation, he's done a good enough job drafting. But in the next few years, he's going to have some first round picks that are going to be judged. He's going to have a second round pick in Mike Hall that's going to be judged. He's going to have an entire 2022 and 2023 draft that's going to be ready to be judged. And depending on how things shake out, that 2023 draft might look like he hit the jackpot when it comes to day 3 and later. Right? If you look at it, like what Cedric Tillman could be a hit. We know that Martin Emerson is a hit. It might be a DeJuan Jones hit there. Like you might just have gotten lucky and gotten a lot of good players in those couple of years. But how you spend these first round picks, I mean, that's the difference from bouncing back and being a division contender in a couple of years or sooner or maintaining mediocrity. There's not going to be a lot of margin for error in the first 3 rounds of the draft for the Cleveland Browns. Like they got to get at least a starter and a star within their next 6 top 3 round picks. It just has to happen. Free agency is going to be critical because now that you're maneuvering around this Watson contract, who you sign and why you sign somebody is going to be criticized a lot more. If you sign somebody over 30, doesn't make any sense for this team. So do you make smart signings that pay off in the long term? Jerry Jeudy feels like a smart signing. Do you get more of that? That's going to be another thing that Andrew Berry is going to be judged on, and it's going to be critical. Cap structure. So far, despite all the noise about the Watson contract, where you have to give Andrew Berry a lot of credit for is the fact that the Browns have not lost any of the players that they have marked as future tadpole guys. They've been able to keep pretty much all of the young players that they've wanted to keep. They'll be able to keep Martin Emerson. They were able to keep JOK, Grant Delpit, all the contracts that have come up for extension, David Njoku, the extension there, Jerry Jeudy, the extension there, like Jack Conklin, right? Ethan Posick, everybody that they've come across that they have made a decision they want to keep while dealing with this Watson contract. They've been able to keep. A lot of people had predicted that the Browns would have had to sell, had to basically go and have a fire sale by this point. But that's not been the case. They've been able to keep everybody that they've wanted to keep. Obviously, you want that to continue. You're going to have to eat the brunt of that Watson contract sooner than later. It's when you choose to eat that brunt and what's the sacrifice of eating the brunt of that contract. If you can eat the brunt of that contract and the most it costs you is that you're not able to go crazy in free agency, then you did a great job maneuvering around that contract, right? If you can maneuver around that contract without having to lose any key players, without having to be forced to let some big-time players walk in free agency, then you did a masterful job of working around that contract. That's where that's going to be judged, right? When people talk about, the salary cap, the salary cap, the salary cap. Okay, who do you lose because the salary cap is high for the Browns, right? If that answer to that question is nobody, and it's that contract, then yeah, Andrew Berry's going to be looked at a lot differently, especially if the Browns draft well, they make some savvy free agent signs, and by the 2025 or 2026, they're ready to compete for the playoffs again. People are going to look at that and be like, damn, Cleveland's got a really good GM. He really knows what he's doing. The one area that if I look at like Andrew Berry, like I give him credit for, the trades. He's been very successful with these trades, right? But even last year, the Dustin Hopkins 7th round pick won, the Amari Cooper trade, and then getting a 3rd round, like He's been very successful with trades. I don't really have a question about if he's going to make some savvy trades or not. He's been pretty good at working the trade market. The question is like, okay, what's going to be our hit rate in free agency? And most importantly, with these picks that you're going to get back in the first round, what are you going to do with it? Because that's the most shaky part of Andrew Berry's whole resume. All the players that the Browns have identified that they want to keep long term, none of those guys are Andrew Berry first round picks, right? Grant Delpit, JLK are second round picks. Martin Emerson's a third round pick. DeJuan Jones a fourth round pick. And it's great that you could draft guys that you want to extend in those rounds, but you really want to see them hit on a couple of first round picks here, right? I think the one thing that Andrew Berry needs as a GM, right, to get people off his back, because a lot of people still are on Andrew Berry, or at least critical of Andrew Berry right now. What he needs is he needs to contribute a player in the draft to this team that is undoubtedly one of their best players. I think JOK, before the injury, was on his way to becoming that. There were times where he was like the best player on defense. You could argue the same thing about Grant Delpit, but it just hits more when it's an offensive player. So if it's an offensive player, it could work there too. But he really needs a first-round pick to hit and to be one of the better players on the team. I think if that happens, people will kind of just let it go, right? Whatever their criticism is with Andrew Berry in the drafting. I think that's why these next two first-round picks for Andrew Berry are going to be very crucial, because I think that's going to be what a lot of people judge Andrew Berry off of, right? And this, to me, will be part like of how I look at this offseason and the key for him. Andrew needs to draft well this year and next year. Andrew needs to make some crucial free agency signings this year and next year. And Andrew needs to do a really good job of maneuvering the cap. If he does these things successfully, then the Browns are going to be in a good place, despite all the turmoil that they dealt with during the Watson era. But that's who the spotlight is on now, for me at least. It's on Andrew Berry.